Verlags. Und natürlich begrüße ich sehr herzlich John Scalzi, first time in Germany.
Ja, ich hatte vor 7 Jahren Deutsch gelernt und learned nothing, sadly. I'm very sorry I can't speak your language, it's too me leid, but one of the things that I'm genuinely pleased to be here, I remember the wonderful folks at the United States State Department called me up, or sent me an email going, we'd love to have you come, would you like to come? And I'm like, yeah. When I came over, people were like, you'll be able to go to Oktoberfest. And I'm like, too late, and I don't drink beer anyway, which astounds people. They're like, you don't drink beer, why are you going to Germany? There's nothing else that Germany is good for besides beer. And I'm like, they make good cars, so.
Spaceships are
better. Your spaceships are awesome. Their spaceships shoot lasers. My spaceships in the back home, there are no lasers in there. I'm going to read from The Wild Planet, which in the United States was known as Fuzzy Nation. And it's a story about a man who meets up with a new, small, very furry alien race, and the question becomes, is this race just very cute, adorable creatures, or is it something more? Are they actually people? So the chapter I'm going to read from you is chapter 3, which is our hero's first encounter with these creatures. Chapter 3 of Fuzzy Nation / Der Wild Planet. Jack Holloway's skimmer was roughly halfway back to his home when his info panel alerted him that his house was being broken into. The emergency alert system's movement alarm had been tripped. Crap, Holloway said, and he jabbed the autopilot function on the skimmer. The skimmer skewed momentarily as it acquired signal and pathing from Holloway's home base. There was no traffic here. Holloway's survey territory was deep inside a continent-wide jungle, far away from any population centers, or indeed any other humans. So the course was more or less a straight line to home over the hills and trees. Autopilot engaged, Holloway picked up his info panel and clicked through to the security camera, which showed nothing. Holloway had the camera on his work desk and had generally used it as a hat stand. His view of his house and whoever was currently inside it was being blocked by a stained pork pie hat he had worn for amusement's sake during his second year of law school at Duke. Stupid hat, Holloway said. He kicked up the gain on the security camera's microphone and held the info panel speaker against his ear on the chance the interloper might talk. No luck. There were no voices, and what little else he could hear was being washed out by the sound of the skimmer engines and the wind rushing through the open cockpit. At the time Zara Corp started mining Mount Isabel, Holloway had idly wondered how an area could be restored to a pristine state once everything of value had been mined out of it. But this was not the same thing as him exhibiting actual concern. He'd been the one who did the original survey of Mount Isabel. The small sunstone patch, those very rare, very valuable gemstones. The small sunstone patch that first drew his attention was exhausted in a matter of weeks, but the mount was a good source of anthracite coal, and relatively rare rockwood tree grew on the mount and down its side toward the river. He'd gotten his 0.25% out of the find, a decent enough sum, and had moved on. Holloway's critical eye guessed that Mount Isabel had another year or two left in her before she was mined down to a molehill, at which time Zara Corp would airlift out its equipment and drop in a clutch of terrified summer interns who would hurriedly strew bags of rockwood seeds on the ground. A loud crash came out of the info panel. Whoever was in Holloway's house had just dropped something breakable. Holloway swore and pressed the button that would enclose the skimmer cockpit and then opened the throttle. They'd be home in 5 minutes. The birds in the tree tops would just have to take their chances. Holloway's house was a tree house, or more accurately, a platform anchored across several very tall spikewoods, on the edges of which stood the modest prefabricated cabin that was his living quarters, and the 2 sheds in which Holloway kept his surveying and prospecting supplies. The only easy way into Holloway's compound was by skimmer. It was possible that someone could have approached by foot and then climbed up, but that person would have had to have been either very lucky or very confident. So, either there was a super awesome ninja assassin lurking in his cabin, knocking over pottery, or it was just some dumb animal. When Holloway first came to Zara at 23 and had his treetop compound built, the place was infested with them. Carl, his dog, arrived shortly thereafter. "Hey, Carl," Holloway said to his dog, "I think we have ourselves a lizard problem." Carl perked up at this. He very much enjoyed his role as a solver of lizard problems. He sniffed happily and headed off in the direction of one of the storage sheds. "Hey, dummy," Holloway had said to Carl's tail, which was whipping back and forth. He walked over to his dog and whacked him gently on the flank. "You're going in the wrong direction. The lizard is in the house." Holloway pointed in the direction of the cabin. He looked at the cabin at the same time, catching the image of the cat staring at him through the window over his work desk. Holloway stared back at the cat. It took him a second to remember he didn't own a cat. It took him a second after that to remember that cats usually didn't stand on two legs. "What the hell is that?" Holloway said out loud. Carl turned at the sound of his master's voice and saw the cat thing in the window. The cat thing opened its mouth. Carl barked like a mad dog and bolted toward the cabin door. Less than a second later, Holloway could hear the sound of many things breaking. "Oh shit," Holloway said, and ran for the cabin door. Holloway undid the bolt and cracked the door open just in time to see the cat thing running toward it. The cat thing looked up, saw Holloway, and skidded, desperately trying to change its vector of direction. Carl, directly behind the cat thing, leapt up to avoid the breaking creature and twisted mid-flight, connecting his flank with the cabin door, slamming it shut on Holloway's forehead and nose. Holloway cursed and dropped to his knees by the closed door, clutching his nose. Holloway stood up, touched his nose one more time to make sure it wasn't going to spontaneously gush, and then very carefully opened the door to his cabin. The cabin looked like one of Holloway's college dormitory rooms at the end of a semester, an explosion of papers and objects on the floor, which should have been on a desk or shelf. Dishes previously in the cabin's tiny sink were shattered on the ground. Holloway's spare info panel was likewise face down on the floor. He couldn't bring himself to see whether it was still functional or not. Carl was propped up against this cabin's sole bookcase, barking madly. A quick glance out established that he had treed the cat thing on top of the bookcase. Books and binders had been flung off the shelves as either the thing climbed up the shelf or Carl tried to get at it. The bookshelf was nowhere close to anything the cat could jump to. It seemed like it was too tall for the creature to jump down from. It stared down at Carl and then over at Holloway, alternating between them, cat's eyes wide and terrified. "Quiet, Carl," Holloway had said, but the dog was too out of his mind with the thrill of the chase to hear his master. Holloway glanced around the room. Amid the mess, he saw the creature's place of entrance, a small, tilting window in Holloway's sleeping alcove. He must have left it unlocked. He looked back at the cat thing, which was staring right at him. It stared at the window, and then back at him. It was as if the critter knew he had figured out how it got in. Holloway went to the tilting window in the alcove, closed it, and locked it. Then he walked over to his dog and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. Carl stopped barking with a surprised whir and skidded his back paws ineffectually against the floor. Holloway maneuvered the dog to the cabin door, opened the door, and tossed the animal out. "Well, you little fuzzy thing," Holloway said. "Now it's just you and me." Thank you very much.
By the way, you can see the future and the past sitting side by side. I've got a physical book edited.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
My screensaver is my wife, so every time I look at my thing, I show up a picture of my wife. That's not a bad thing.
That's you can't do that here.
No, you can't. It's a
One
thing.
of these days.
Yeah, the next cover, you have her on there in a spaceship shooting lasers.
You did decide to write science fiction at one point.
Oh, yeah.
And you stick with it. Is this something you want to do for the rest of your life? Or you want to go in another direction?
What should I tell the man who acquires my books in Germany?
Well, maybe the first question would be, why do you want to write science fiction?
Well, I think for two reasons. One, I did read quite a lot of science fiction when I was younger, so when I started writing, I knew it was a thing I could write. It was either that or mysteries, and I figured, science fiction would be more fun. But the other thing is that the type of writing that I do is very, in terms of my writing style, is very straightforward. I want to tell a story. I have some really cool things that I want to have happen in a story. You got aliens, and you got explosions, and you got, more aliens, and you got, all these sorts of things, and it all leads up to something. I want to tell a story. The other nice thing about science fiction is that I can write a mystery or a thriller. A lot of people think that science fiction is just about the aliens, or just about the lasers, or the explosions, or the spaceships, and all of those things are important for science fiction, or all the speculative elements are important, but at the end of the day, it is about your characters and it is about the story you tell. And that's one of the reasons that I like writing science fiction, is I can do that. It makes me happy.
What science fiction definitely is about, as Old Highland famously said once, is change.
Yes.
It sort of defines the genre. And so if we look around the world today, there's a lot of change happening
Yes.
as we speak.
Yes.
So is this something, saying the real world, is this something you look at and incorporate in your fiction?
Well, you have to. I mean, it's like I said, when I wrote Divide Planet, part of the reason that I wanted to update it is because the world had changed so much. That in some ways this was a future that's clearly in the past. That the branching between our world and this world is 40 years ago. And you do have to take all this into consideration. I remember in one of my books, someone complained, because I had people working on tablets, right? And someone complained, it's like, that's not science fiction, that's an iPhone. And I'm like, yeah, but the reason that the iPhone works is because the iPhone this is a really good form factor. So, but you do want to keep track of change, and you want to keep being interested in what people are going on now. The science fiction is written about the future, but it is written for people who are living today, and so it will always track what their concerns are today. If you look at the concerns of the golden age of science fiction, there's a lot of, reaching to the stars, or being concerned about, what our place in the universe, which has a mirror with the Cold War, that sort of competition. In the early 70s, some of the most significant books, Stand on Zanzibar, or Make Room by Harry Harrison, are about overpopulation, which was a huge concern. These days, part of our obsession with zombies, is a reflection of our worry about, viruses and complacency. Both of those things. So the things that are popular are a reflection of what our concerns are in the modern world. And I think you have to be careful. Science fiction writers have a problem of they have a political position, and then they start incorporating it into their works. I certainly do have grounds, a fundamental political point of view. I do have fundamental political concerns. And if I incorporate them into the story, that's fine. But what I have to do is I have to put it in context of the story so it makes sense within the story, that I'm not, doing, and I'm not being this, not being this annoying person who's going like, and another thing. The last thing that we need is, yet another author, lecturing you on what you should think. You can present evidence and let people, question you and do all that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, you want to give them a good story that, even if they're like, okay, some of your ideas are crazy, but at least I had a good time reading your story, then that's fine.